Karibuni sana. Today I'm here with my very special guest, my granddaughter, Sama. Karibu sana, Lydia. Thank you so much for coming. Today was just one of those days. Like, work was so busy, I didn't even know if I would make it. So I'm really happy to also see my colleagues here. But I never have to think twice if it's something to do with EmpowerWiz. So I have enough energy to last us the hour, and I'm also looking for your interactions as we have this conversation. So I think we can start. It's 6:37 and we'd like to finish within the hour. So just a small intro. My name is Nora Nyamache, for those who haven't met me. And I'm the CEO and founder of EmpowerWiz. EmpowerWiz is about 4 years old. And what we do at EmpowerWiz is give every child a voice. How we do that is through skills training for kids, which are physical sessions usually. And then we also hold these conversations monthly on every last Thursday of the month. And today we're going to be talking about healthy boundaries. So I think the true test to boundaries is, my granddaughter is only 5 years old, and I've asked her to stay still and be nice during this session. So she has promised me that she's going to be a good girl, and she's always been a good girl. And for just 5 years, she does pretty well. Sama, say hi.
Hi.
And what's your name?
Sama.
Sama who?
Michaela.
Sama. Those are not all your names. Say all your names.
Sama, Michaela, Nunda, Sunshine.
Sama, Michaela, Nunda, Sunshine. So I'm a proud grandma of many. This is one of them. This is actually for those who think I'm young. So this is for you to know that I'm a grandmother. It's a grandmother by extension because it's my niece's child. So I'm a grandmother no less. So today we want to talk about healthy boundaries and what really are healthy boundaries. But before we start, I'd like to just give an opportunity for any of us who has a view on what boundaries are or what the expectation of this conversation would be. So let's have hands up, or you can just unmute and speak. Mary, Clara, Nina, Mercy, Stella, Lydia, John, Happiness, Belinda, any of you, just unmute and speak. What's your view, or what do you think about boundaries? There's no, I mean, every comment. Happiness, please go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. I know we all have expectations, but my 9-year-old wants to tell us. So
that's really nice.
Say your name first.
My name is all my 3 names are David Baraka Mongare. And my suggestion on what a health boundary is that a health boundary is a boundary that you are not supposed to pass so that you stay healthy. That's my suggestion.
Wow, thank you. And you are right. You know, a boundary is like, you know, between Kenya and Uganda, Kenya and Tanzania. So that is the true definition of a boundary. Thank you very much, and for being brave. I'm looking forward to meeting you. Thank you, Happiness. Anyone who has a child in the room, my 5-year-old. Thank you so much. Clara, if you have the children around you, there's no problem for them to join. And I'm waiting for you guys to say something. Is someone on mute? Henrietta wants to join.
Not from my children are up and about.
Okay.
Maybe in a few years when I get grandchildren, they'll be around me. But maybe I can define what boundaries are. I think I agree with David. It's limits that somebody should not go beyond, and it's usually set in advance, so that somebody already knows that I should not go beyond this thing. Not wait for the situation and then I'll start wanting where's the limit. So it's something that is set in advance, where somebody should not go. Then it could be in various aspects of life.
Wow. Thank you, Clara. That is correct. Actually, interestingly, Google does say it's a line which marks the limit of an area. So it's a dividing line. It's so think of it just like I thought. Even for counties now that in Kenya we have counties. Usually when you're approaching the county, you're usually welcome to Nyamira County, welcome to Meru County. So boundaries are just that, and they in terms of now how we relate as human beings, they are the framework that we set in terms of how we want to be treated by others or how we treat other people. So it can be a physical boundary of this is my space and I'd like you not to come into my space, or it can be an emotional boundary around how people talk to you or how they treat you when you're in emotional states. So that's basically just a definition of Summer, I want you to stay still. Okay, thank you very much. So so actually setting boundaries, respecting boundaries is all a form of self-care, and it's something not only adults need, but children also need to know what the boundaries are. And as opposed to adults who might have a better understanding in terms of what our boundaries are, and to be honest, some of us do not, children need our help in both setting the boundaries and also respecting the boundaries. So why are boundaries important? They help us maintain healthy relationships. And okay, thank you, John. Limits of appropriate behavior that is set between two people. Yes. And the two people do not have to be both adults. They can be between two children, can be between a child and an adult. It can be between a parent and a child, a teacher and their students. It can be in the church, the pastor and his congregants. So boundaries are basically something that we use on a daily basis and in every moment as we interact with people. So the what I really wanted to underscore is that some people might look at boundaries as a bad thing, but it's actually a good thing, because for those who haven't set boundaries, it's good to know that it's a form of self-care. So if you love yourself enough, then you need to set boundaries. So today we're just going to explore boundaries between parents and children, and how these boundaries help guide children in how to interact with others, and basically how then do we as parents help children set boundaries, and are we able to check our own boundaries and model this behavior for kids. So I just had a few boundaries with children around expressing emotions respectfully, respecting others, and that's others, adults and children, taking turns and sharing things, personal hygiene, and it's a holiday, so bedtime, screen time, chores, homework, when to do the homework and how much effort they should put in their homework, eating, boundaries around when do we eat. We can't eat all the time. Do we access the fridge and the pantry all the time, or do we have snack time? So you have all these boundaries, and for those who are working from home, it's actually going to be harder in terms of managing the space that you're working from, because if you have a 5-year-old like me and she wants something and you're in the middle of a conference call then you start realizing that it becomes very hard if you haven't set boundaries. And the other thing that Clara said that I thought was important is when you set these boundaries, sometimes they really need to be set early. And that means for children, you don't want to wait until they are 18 or 15 or 16 and then set those boundaries. So I want to ask a question. What age do you think children need boundaries? Like, from what age should we start setting boundaries? So let's have either answers in the chat, or you could raise your hand. Like, just throw a number. What do you think? 5 years, 10 years, 15 years? At what age should we set boundaries for children? For those who just joined, karibuni sana. Karibu Henrietta. Thank you so much for coming. At what age should we set boundaries? Lydia, at what age should we set boundaries? Okay, even 3 years. Thank you. Happiness, 4 years.
5 years.
5 years. 1. Thank you. So 1 year, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. Anyone else?
From birth.
From birth. Thank you. Who said from birth? Clara.
Clara.
Thank you. Okay. Anyone else? Henrietta, thank you. From birth. Any other questions? Any other answers, I mean? Okay, we need to set boundaries from the time they begin to understand the world around them. Thank you, Stella. Yes, so 1, 4, 3, we got 5. And I mean, those are all right answers. And to be honest, I agree with Clara. The only difference is that they have to be age appropriate boundaries, because there's a boundary that you would set for a 1-year-old that they might not understand. So a baby, you know, there's probably creative ways of setting boundaries. Like you've heard of babies who cry maybe for, you know, an hour or two, and there are some babies who cry for a shorter time. And as the baby is growing, when they're starting to crawl, when they're starting to learn how to walk, when they want to hold things for themselves, just think of that as mini boundaries that you're setting for them. And usually you're just trying to make it age appropriate. For example, for a little baby, you know, you've heard of babies who the first word they say is no. And that's the first boundary. At least for most moms, that's the first boundary we set. Like, I remember when my babies used to suckle and they would bite me, and I would stop and do no. And actually, over time, I realized a suckling baby does understand, because you pull away, you look them in the eye, and you say no. So, you know, for those of you who've had babies who the first word was no, just remember it's because they've been hearing that word quite often. Then you have the babies who are now crawling, they're starting to pull wires, they're starting to climb places, they want to eat everything in the house. Then again, you have a new set of boundaries, because now you're starting to say, no, don't climb that, you know, don't sit there, don't throw that against the wall. And it's very important how we set these boundaries, because it can be a make or break. Because sometimes the way you'll handle a tantrum for one child is not the same way you'll handle for another child. So I think the right answer is basically from birth, and at least that's my view. I might not be expert, but usually you'll have ages like preschoolers between like the ages of 3 and 5, like Summer, are very good in terms of just understanding, following rules. When you set a routine for them, they're able to follow through. And then it has to be like small time spans, because their attention span is quite short. So the other thing I wanted us to discuss is what causes poor boundaries. Like, what causes poor boundaries? And I'm just thinking, like for some of us growing up, in Shags, I've just recently learned the word boundaries or what it really meant. And I think for most of my life, my boundaries were crossed, but I didn't know what that was, although I knew how it felt. Just give me a second. So I think for us, bear with me. For most of us, we might not have known what boundaries were. And sometimes you learn when your boundaries have been crossed. It could be you're trying to tell another adult you don't want this, or you don't want to do this, or go here, and they're insisting or forcing you to go or do certain things, and you realize my boundaries have been crossed. So what really causes poor boundaries? We could also have some answers from the group. Just raise your hand, or you can unmute, and we can talk about what causes poor boundaries. And thanks to the new joiners, we're just in the middle of the conversation, just exploring what causes poor boundaries. And there's no right answer. We're just having a people pleasing. Yeah, people pleasing actually does cause poor boundaries, because even the fact that you're people pleasing means that also you don't have your boundaries well defined. And there's many ways to define people pleasing. Thank you for that, Henrietta. Because sometimes people pleasing is anything you're asked to do, you say yes. And sometimes you'll find yourself in the middle of a place where you're biting more than you can chew. And that becomes, a cause for lack of boundaries, lack of communication. Yeah, because you're not communicating that you're uncomfortable or what you're comfortable with. So that becomes a cause for poor boundaries. Thank you, Stella. Another cause for poor boundaries. Another cause for poor boundaries. Another cause, and I'll just chime in as we wait for others to get in the chat. Another cause is a history of abuse, where maybe as children you've grown in an environment where there was emotional, psychological, physical or sexual abuse. And this repeated abuse causes poor boundaries, because maybe as a child you don't even understand what's right or wrong, because maybe the adults in your life do certain things that you're uncomfortable with, but you never know if those are poor boundaries until maybe you're older. So abuse, domestic violence, any kind of trauma, poor attachment, parent-child conflict, and any of this can affect appropriate boundaries at different stages of our lives. And there is no, I think it's a journey that we all go through, like in terms of how we establish boundaries and how we improve on how we set our boundaries, because sometimes until your boundary is crossed, you don't realize how important something is to you. So I wouldn't say that as adults we must have clear boundaries. I think it's a learning journey where we need to learn and basically just find out what our boundaries look like and what our boundaries being crossed looks like. So that's I think misunderstanding. Thank you, Happiness. Yeah, misunderstanding, which couples well with lack of communication. So you're saying something, you're doing something, but the other person is taking it as something else. So those are some of the causes for poor boundaries. And unless there's anyone else who wants to say something, I think those are really good additions. The other one I wanted to lack of self-awareness. Yeah. Lack of self-awareness. And remember earlier we mentioned that setting boundaries is actually a form of self-care. So lack of self-awareness does lead to poor boundaries. So I don't see anything else on the chat. I think the next thing I wanted us to discuss is around why is it important for us to set boundaries for children. Why should we set boundaries for children? Because I think some of us have questioned how kids' boundaries are set, maybe when kids have been violated, and this is either physically, emotionally, or like if our kid goes outside to play and everybody takes away their toys and they come home crying. And sometimes that's when you realize, maybe I need to teach my child about boundaries, because without those boundaries, then they're not respected. And even for a small child, like when they go outside with their favorite toy and another child snatches it and they come home crying, that's a boundary that has been crossed. And unfortunately, boundaries work together. So if someone who respects boundaries, but I meet someone who does not respect boundaries, then there'll be a tug of war there in terms of who wins. So that means that we have to get stronger in terms of how we assert our boundaries. And the hardest thing is how to teach your child how to assert themselves. Maybe they're outside, maybe the other children are hitting them, and that's why it's so important to have these conversations and discussions with our children around, give them scenarios. If you go outside and somebody wants your toy, come home with them and tell them they have to ask nicely. Boundaries even sound like teaching our kids the magic words of please, thank you, may I. All these things help the child establish boundaries and respect boundaries. So the boundaries that we set for children and why it's important, create safe spaces for our children. It helps them understand the meaning of big words that they may not know until they're older, like what is really respect. When you teach a child that when you're coming to my room, you have to knock, and then once you knock, you can't just open the door. You have to actually say, can I come in? Or I need to see you for 5 minutes or something like that. So it's really important for children for us to set boundaries and allow your child to walk through maybe violating boundaries and then use that as teachable moments. The last question I wanted us to explore is why kids need to set limits for themselves and develop self-discipline. Age is a factor, but there's a wide range of developmental stages that children go through. And sometimes you'll find a 5-year-old who can sit still and a 5-year-old who can't sit still. And as we determine if it's a boundary issue, we even realize there's special needs children, like autistic children cannot sit still. So we need to just be cognizant of the developmental stage of a child, any challenges they might have, what environment they've been raised in, if they were raised in an environment where there were no boundaries and maybe this child needs to learn from scratch. So there's all these dynamics around now when you're deciding what boundary a child needs to learn. And just to be clear, that boundaries can both be physical or emotional. A physical one is do not touch this or do not go there. An emotional one is, if you do something wrong and this is to a child, please tell me the truth. Do not lie to me. Or if things like, if you want to cry, it's okay to cry, but you can't break things. You're having an emotional, a child is having an emotional breakdown, and then a parent starts to beat them up. So, so I just wanted to check if anyone has something to say around why we think kids need boundaries, because maybe some of us might be imagining or thinking that boundaries are only for adults. Why do children need boundaries? Moses, thank you for coming. Anyone can post in the chat or unmute. Juliet, thank you for coming. Terry, thank you for coming. Rolene, I see you. Faith, karibu sana. So anyone who would like to contribute on why do kids need boundaries? Moses, why do kids need boundaries? Or another way to put it is, what happens when kids don't have boundaries? Like maybe some examples of when we haven't set boundaries for children? What happens? Like, what are some of the, and this can range from a child of 0 all the way to 18. What does lack of boundaries look like? And we can just give examples. I had my granddaughter with me. I told her to keep still, and she has actually slept. So let me just place a pillow for her. Okay. Mary, please go ahead.
Good evening, everybody. I think setting boundaries for all of us is important, so as also to maintain the discipline and status quo. Because if we let them be, or we let ourselves be, we'll be in a position where probably also the children can do things which are not expected, causing embarrassment, at whatever age. And even as grown-ups, we have to set our own boundaries so that we are aligned in terms of what is this I can do at a certain time. That's what I can say.
Thank you, Mary. That is correct. And I mean, boundaries can go both ways. If we want to create a safe environment for children, they need boundaries. And take an example of a child who doesn't understand that climbing on something that is like a glass shelf is not dangerous. What's going to happen is very soon the space will become unsafe, because the child will climb, they will fall down, the glass will break, and then we're headed to the hospital. So safety in all ways, and it can be emotional safety and physical safety, is something that both adults and children require. And I would say each of us is going to be at different stages of how well our boundaries are set, first as adults, because children will watch what your boundaries look like. Juliet, please go ahead.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to contribute on boundaries when it comes to kids. And maybe I should just give examples, because I feel like if you don't set boundaries when it comes to children, you tend to find them, for instance, if you don't tell your child, like, you don't just call anyone uncle. You don't just call anyone uncle. You don't just call anyone. You'll find them, they just maybe they'll touch even a visitor's phone. They'll call even the gateman uncle. That's the norm with I think it's an African thing, or maybe some people have normalized it, which is not right. Yeah. You just can't let your kids just be easy with everyone. You have to tell them, like, this is where you draw the line when it comes to touching people's things. This is where you draw the line when it comes to interacting with people. You just don't let them, if you don't create that boundaries, you might find your children just free to go anywhere, follow anyone, trust anyone. You should also make them understand that it's okay to feel vulnerable, to cry. If you tell them, like, stop, I don't want you to cry, they might fear expressing themselves in the future, and you'll not be able to understand that your children are not okay. So boundaries does not mean restricting them from being themselves. It just means watching them to make sure they're safe and they know the limits of where or who they meet or who they interact with or in what they do. Yeah, I think that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Juliet. That is so powerful. And I like the example of, this African thing of everybody's uncle, everybody's auntie. Honestly, I'm such a big believer in that. Like, even like my 5-year-old, I had to explain to her, this is your aunt, this is your uncle, like, I'm your grandma because I'm a sister to your mom. It's so important. Even simple exercises that I really liked when my kids were young, we would draw a family tree and we would write, there's mom, dad, there's siblings, and then there's the grandparents, and you just keep going up. You can even tell them about great grandparents. So in that exercise, you're helping them understand the family history. and then you're also helping them understand the relationship that they have with everybody. So if, let's say, you're told them, oh, this is a picture of your Uncle Kevin. So if another Kevin comes in the house and they say, hi, Uncle Kevin, it's important for you to let them know, no, this is not your Uncle Kevin. This is another Kevin who is my friend. Otherwise, the child becomes very confused. And Juliet, thank you so much for raising that, because it's probably an African narrative where, like, your cousins from Shag say you're a sister, and everybody is a sister, everybody is a brother, everybody is an uncle. So we pass that to our kids, and the kids end up very confused, because at some point they're like, how many grandmas do I have, and how many aunties, and how many uncles? And usually this is when they are older. And what you're doing is actually creating an unsafe environment for the child, because think about an uncle who's a pedophile and they are going to abuse your child. The minute you tell them that this is an uncle and this person makes attempts to abuse the child already trusts the person because they're an uncle. So when they're doing something inappropriate to them, the child will be confused because they're thinking, I'm safe with this person because they're my uncle. And that doesn't mean that biological uncles cannot abuse our children. So of course, again, as we are teaching our kids boundaries and setting them, we also need to be careful about the spaces that we put our children in. Because you can have your child in a place where they're actually overwhelmed and they're not able to assert their boundary. So I think this happens, again, maybe in church situations. I've heard of children getting abused in church situations where we trust whether it's the pastor or the church elder too much. You leave the children with them. There's been situations of doctors abusing children. So those proactive ideas around what you teach children is about, like, their body. Like, who can touch your body, who can see your body, should you look at people when they're not wearing clothes, and what does that mean? If somebody gives you candy or sweets and tells you to go to their house, should you do that or not? By what time should you go home? We keep asking why teenagers don't want to come home, but they used to play outside until 11 p.m., because the outside was lit. And now when they've graduated to go into the club, we are wondering, why is this child not coming home? But you were not worried when they were 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years old. They could play outside because you knew that they're just outside and I know where they are. But these things, as we had said earlier, start from a very early age. We need to establish what the boundaries look like and discuss age-appropriate boundaries for children. And one thing we need to be aware of, especially, I think the common age is 2 years, kids will test your limits. And it's how consistent you are and how the frequency of you setting the same boundary. So let's say for those who work from home, every day you're going to get into a meeting at a certain time and the child will come and say, mommy, or daddy, I want this, or I want to go here, or can you do this? So the first day, maybe you'll pause, put it on mute and say to the child, mommy or daddy is in a meeting and I cannot talk to you, or I cannot get it for you. You need to go and talk to the other person in the house. So that is day 1. Day 2, you need to tell the child the same thing and probably have the discussion before the meeting and after the meeting. So how consistent we are in teaching the child boundaries also really helps them in understanding the seriousness of the boundary and understanding these other aspects of, you need to respect this time because I'm at work and this is what it means for me. You can even explain to the child what is a true emergency. Like, they need to stop your meeting if this happens. So if a child goes to the kitchen and they get hurt and they're scared to reach out to the parent because the boundary they were told is, you can't call me when I'm in a meeting. Everybody would understand if you were on a call and your child, got hurt. So those are now some of the things you need to tell a child, that this is the boundary. When I'm having a meeting, don't disturb me unless it's urgent or it's an emergency. Then you describe to them what an emergency looks like. So of course, a 2-year-old's emergency could be different. It could be, I can't find my red crayon. So after maybe the meeting, you can let the child know that you need to put your crayons together so that you don't disturb my meeting. So it's something you can build on day by day by just building on the original conversation and always adding more examples that are age appropriate. And there are some activities that you can do with children to teach them boundaries, like board games, yard games, like when you tell somebody you're going to run till here and then stop, and then this is what's going to happen. You can have role playing, like in the family, where you have meetings and we say when one person wants to speak, they have to raise their hand. So those are just small ways you can do. You can read, like you can read guided conversations with like a young child at bedtime. You tell them it's their turn to read, and then you have the other child read, and you make sure that when one child is reading, the other one is listening. So as parents, we have so many what I call teachable moments in the house, like when you put food on the table and one child says they want to eat all the food, or when one child takes something from another one. We have these opportunities, and those are the best times to teach boundaries, because if you use a textbook, a child will never understand. But when a child goes outside and they come home and you say, how was it outside? And you say, they say so and so took my cup and they refused to give it back and I was crying and they started hitting me, then you know it's time to have a conversation with the other parents. So as our kids interact outside, and this could be at school, always, because even bullying starts with boundaries that have been crossed. But sometimes if the child does not feel safe at home, they, like what Juliet was saying, if you've not explained to the child, they might not yes, happiness, we will have it on YouTube, so you'll be able to watch it. So the child needs these examples. And especially what I was saying is when a child comes home from school, from church, from your visiting your friends, always ask them very open-ended questions. Or, so what was the best part about the visit? Who did you see there? Did you make any friends? Were they nice to you? Were you happy? Were you sad? What made you sad? How did it make you feel? And a child would say, I felt sad when auntie was shouting at me and I didn't know what to do. Maybe I had I hadn't used the bathroom correctly, and somebody wasn't kind to me, or I was crying and somebody told me I can't cry. So you start to realize you don't want a child to normalize their boundaries being crossed. So it's very important to always get these stories, like just ask open-ended questions. What was the favorite part of your day? What is your favorite subject or lesson for today? And what wasn't so good about your day? Did you make any new friends? And they'll tell you, no, nobody wanted to be my friend because I didn't share with them. Then now you get to talk about sharing. Or another one tells you, I didn't eat my snack because when I opened it, everybody took one and I didn't have any. So you start to teach the child around how do they share by first loving themselves, maybe taking one and then sharing. Because things like sharing are actually misconstrued as, good things. But you find children who share and have nothing for themselves. And to them, that is sharing. And then they'll say something like, I thought they would see there was nothing for me and leave some for me. But because, that child has not been taught about boundaries around how do you share, for them, they go to school every day with their snack and they come home hungry. So as parents, we have these opportunities to teach our children boundaries. And as they get older, think about teenagers who are going to school, young girls who are meeting young boys. What are the boundaries around touch, around their physical space? Where can they be with certain people? Which places can they avoid? What does a good friendship look like? And when is it a good friend who's respecting their boundaries? So these are all things that we can teach. And like I said, different family dynamics are going to dictate the different boundaries. And so all of us, it's just to maybe do like an assessment. And one exercise I used to do with my kids is we would pick a word and we would say, everybody's going to define what respect looks like. So maybe for my daughter, it was, I don't like when my brother comes into my room without asking me. Maybe for my son, it was, every time I put my iPad on the table, I don't find it there and somebody has used it. So you get these examples, and those are the things you use to teach the kids about boundaries. So there is something they call the 4 C's of boundaries. It's being clear, being confident, being comfortable, and connecting. So these 4 C's need to guide our setting of healthy boundaries. Being clear what you mean, being using very simple terms. You cannot tell, a 5-year-old something very complicated about a boundary. It needs to be short and something that they can understand. And then you also need to sometimes even tone variation, like being assertive, maybe not establishing a boundary for a child in a joking manner, but like what we said for the little children, saying no, and you keep saying that until, and this works even for pets, yeah. So you keep telling the child no until they get to understand what the no means. Then as they get older, you tell them, the reason I told you no is because if you take the glass and throw it on the wall, it's going to break, and then it's going to fall on your leg, or somebody is going to step on it, and then we have to go to the hospital. If you take examples that make sense to the child, then they understand. So another example is a child is climbing over a balcony, and maybe they just watched the Superman movie, and you need to explain to them why they cannot be Superman. And maybe to make it worse, like maybe they have a Superman suit, so they might wear it and actually try to climb the balcony. So we need to really watch what our kids are doing, and that's what guides how we help them set boundaries. And the connection bit is, be affectionate to the child. Like, let's not be insensitive around, like, let me give an example. We've heard of, like, in many situations when children are sexually abused, and then someone tells them, why were you there? Why did you agree? Or why were you dressed like this? And you're not even helping that child to understand what happened. Neither are you doing it with affection and actually helping them process the emotional damage and whatever has happened to them. So if you have examples to share, also for younger children, like I remember I used to tell my children, when we go shopping, you have to hold my hand, because there are people who steal little children. So if you don't tell the child that, they get in the supermarket, they start running around, they go somewhere, they might fall. So sometimes you'll need to use small stories that are not necessarily like true in the bigger meaning of things, but they are true. So they'll keep asking you, is somebody going to steal me? And you say yes. If you go running and a bad person finds you, they're going to steal you. And there's usually these social experiments that are done for children, where somebody pulls up in front of their house and they say, come on, let's go get some ice cream. And you'll see kids get in the car and they go. And usually the person comes back with the children and tries to talk to the parents around, how do you teach your kids boundaries? What do they accept from strangers? Who is a stranger? Who is not a stranger? What space, if they're playing outside, where does the playing end? Should they leave the gate, or should they play inside the gate? And these are like, physical boundaries work very well for the younger ones. And as they get older, then you're telling them about their personal space, about what emotional abuse looks like, when somebody's talking at them or down at them, when somebody's shouting at them, what they need to say, and what's the difference between fighting and pushing back on your boundary. And back to what someone said earlier around people pleasing, you'll find children are being, their boundaries are crossed, and they don't know, and they just cry, and when they come home, maybe they're not able to explain. So that's where the connecting and making the child comfortable to be able to teach them with boundaries. And I just want to just explore a bit more around the simple tactics that as parents we can use when setting boundaries, which include modeling behavior. So if two parents were having a conversation, it's important to, if you are speaking in turns, that maybe mom waits for dad to finish talking and not talk over him, or the reverse. That teaches a child that, okay, you saw when daddy was talking, I was quiet. Okay, now you'll be quiet when I'm talking. And the same applies to the children. So boundaries go both ways. If a child tells you, I don't feel too good, I want to take a nap, or I need some rest. No matter the age, allow them to take that nap. Or if they say I'm not willing to talk about it right now, can I just think it over and we can talk tomorrow? If it's possible, please let's not assert ourselves as parents and say mimi ndio mzazi and I've said we are talking about it now. If it's not urgent, allow the person to take some time out, think about their actions, and then you can have a better and more fruitful discussion the next day. There's also what we call positive reinforcement, something that we are so big on in EmpowerWiz. So when you see a child who is respecting a boundary, you need to actually reward them, talk about it positively, and keep reaffirming them. Oh, I like how you said please when you are asking for that, and thank you for saying thank you when it was given to you. And when you have 2 kids maybe who are not sharing toys, if you talk to them about it and the next day they're actually sharing, make sure you point out that that you're very Mercy, that you're happy that they are able to share. So positive reinforcement is about realizing when the kids are doing it right and actually reinforcing that behavior so that you get more of it. So, and that works for even adults, yeah? The other thing is flexibility and adaptability to boundaries as needs and capabilities change. So, of course, if somebody maybe got disabled, they're, respecting boundaries might not be, possible for them. So let's be cognizant of the life changes that are happening. If a child is going through a difficult time, maybe they might not be able to knock your door. They might just come in and they're crying. Just be cognizant of that moment and support them, as opposed to saying, didn't I tell you have to knock my door? Because maybe the child is just really having an overwhelming moment and you're the safest person for them. So let's just be flexible and adapt to the changes that our children are going through. And then explaining the consequences of crossing a boundary, which is very close to the positive reinforcement. When a child crosses your boundary or another child's boundary, make sure you sit them down and say, do you see what happened there? Remember how I told you not to climb? You see what happened? And just go through the steps, and that allows them to process their action and not to cross that boundary next time. And then always listen to the child. If they feel that it's a boundary they set that has been crossed, because our children are also different. Like I said, the boundary needs of one child might not be for the other. You could have an introvert and an extrovert, and you'll find that both children's needs are different. So let's just, as we help our children set boundaries, let that be something we're cognizant of. I want to just conclude and then give a chance for questions, reactions, comments. Boundaries equal to better decision making. By helping our children set boundaries, we help them make better choices at any age, and even as in our adult lives. When we understand what our boundaries are, respect other people's boundaries in any of the environments we're in, it helps us to make better decisions. And kids love structure and routines, and this really go a long way in helping them set boundaries, especially when they're younger. So create a routine for bedtime, create a routine for homework time, create a routine for meals, create a routine for anything and everything that you could possibly create. And then the structures around what are they expected to do, and if they don't do this, then what is the consequence? So those routines and structures really help. Then the children raised with good boundaries learn that they're not only responsible for their lives, but also they feel free to live their lives any way they choose, as long as they take responsibility for their choices. So for the responsible adult, then the sky is the limit. And the more you value yourself, the healthier your boundaries are. And just finalizing with, just as we expect others to value our boundaries, it's equally important for us to respect the boundaries of others, and that includes our children. So I'd like to end there and thank you all for listening to me. We'll give a few minutes, like 10 minutes, just to take questions, comments, reactions, and it's a conversation. So if you have any, if you can post it in the chat, you can put your hand up, or you can just unmute and speak. And it would be nice even to hear from the younger ones. Like I have Henrietta, who's I think is one of my younger ones, and I really applaud her for joining, because to be honest, we learned some of these things really late, and it's my pleasure to have these conversations even as I'm learning some of these things myself. So reactions, comments, questions, anything that we can discuss. You can put your hand up. Moses, please go ahead.
Hi, Nora.
Hi, Moses.
I'm very glad and very happy for those insights. I deliberately decided to listen alongside my teenager, and I think he has got those boundaries, and why it's important to have those boundaries, so that then when he experiences that from me, he realizes that it is important. And what I would urge the rest of the parents is that we need to have those boundaries, as you placed it rightly, at a very early stage, so that it becomes their DNA all through their life. You don't struggle afterwards trying to rectify what was not done early enough. Personally, I still feel really obligated to my old mom, that my mom, as old as she is, I still feel that the boundaries that she had set for me at my early stage are still with me. Such things like, you please don't come home late, you just need to be present when people are taking meals, and several boundaries that were set. I still feel that I have to do them, otherwise I'll be doing I'll be doing wrong to her, that is. So thank you so much, and I think that was very, very helpful.
Asante sana, Moses, and thank you for allowing your son to listen in. And actually, like you said, boundaries are something, it's a lifelong process, and we really honor our moms. Oh, my granddaughter has woken up. I made her sit still, and she ended up taking a nap. You okay? So I think I've seen some questions or comments on the chat. If I can just have a look at the chat. Bless you. So how can I deal with a teenager girl who likes to wear a tumbo cut and a biker short, and she's good to go out, but as a parent I don't like? Wow, that's powerful, because it's interesting that fashion is so big for these young ones. And I remember having this discussion with my daughter, and I laugh about it now, but she must have been 14, and I think tumbo cuts, or there was something, I think it was tank tops had just come in. And one of the things I made her do that we had to find an in-between is, my daughter used to wear bodysuits, like a black bodysuit or a brown one, and then she would wear her tumbo cut. So of course later she was like, Mom, what was that? And I think it's important for you to even have the discussion with her around what does she consider respectful dressing, and maybe even creating boundaries for her, like saying, you can wear this in your room because it's it's your space, but when you're going outside, it's not appropriate. So this discussion can take many directions, because these kids have peer pressure from fashion and style. They're watching movies, they're seeing other kids, and I think that's the hardest thing for parents, because as you're busy setting boundaries for your children around how they dress or how they don't dress, fashion is still pushing these things. There's also the peer pressure. If they're online, they're seeing how other people dress up. So it's a lot of things going on for the child, and I think the best way is, as we mentioned, the 4 C's. Try and be get the child comfortable around talking about those things. Maybe even go shopping with them as an option for what they can wear that is more respectful in your opinion. Of course, now my kids are older and I don't mind them dressing a certain way, because I also feel that it's harder to control what a 20-year-old is wearing, but you can have a conversation. Just don't talk at them or try and discredit their choices of clothes. It's very important that you have the discussion and that you're meeting them halfway. So find what you can compromise, and maybe you could tell her she could do the tank top but wear jeans, something like that. So it's going to also be something that maybe you can proactively do as the kids get older. Try and discuss what you consider appropriate. Like, I know for us, when we used to go to church as SDAs, we were only allowed to wear dresses. So somehow in my mind, I got to think that if, like, the first time I attended a certain church and they were wearing jeans, I was like, they don't know everybody has to wear a dress when they go to church. So these are some of now the things that as you're teaching the child, you're giving them practical examples and you work with them. I guess for me, I think if we're too rough on them, then you get rebellion and you don't make progress. So Hailene, good luck. Let's go. I'm a mom to a 2-year-old daughter, but I just want to know how parents of both sexes, boys and girls, draw boundaries. Who speaks to the baby girl and who speaks to the boy, and what is the difference in the boundaries you draw for both sexes, and how do you make them understand? Maybe we can Moses, you can help us with that, because I know you have both sexes, even Clara. Let's have one of us help answer this question. How do you, for 2-year-olds, let's have some examples. How do you set boundaries? Because that's why they call it terrible too. Mercy, how did you set boundaries for your 2-year-olds? I know some of us are thinking like, no, mine are busy throwing tantrums. So, and you might find you're winning in some spaces. Like you might be winning in bedtime. Like when you say, guys, it's 9 o'clock or it's 8 o'clock, it's time for bed. It works out. But you might not be winning in other spaces. But let's have some examples on a 2-year-old. Clara, you might have forgotten, but I'm sure you can share something. Or Mary, or Lydia. It's not a full project, like you have to have set all the boundaries. Thank you, Mary.
Yeah, maybe some small input. I think I'm a mother of 3 boys, and I can see each of their stages at 2 years was totally different. Like my firstborn was quite calm. Those are many years ago. He's 26 now. Very calm, and in that childhood, there's no much activity. But I can tell you, my second one was the opposite. I know I'm talking when he's in the sitting room. Yeah. He was hyper, and so for me, I struggled to actually, when you have one who's very calm and you get another one hyper, you can imagine. You are literally fighting. I remember one time he even put his hand in between the gate and that 2 years it broke. So what I would do is that, especially in certain behaviors, because at times at 2 years, like it took a bit of time to actually talk. So when you do something wrong, I would literally just, the way you do a hand like no, or you shake, to the opposite direction. And I saw that helping. But each child is different, and really the approach has to be different. And whether boy or girl, believe you me, they will never be the same. For the mothers in the house, you can testify that even the pregnancy is very different. So we just have to be ready to embrace and deal with each case separately. And each child is special with their own, way of doing things. Yeah.
Wow, thank you, Mary, for that. So it's true. I think we some of us might not know, but children have personalities right from when they are in our bellies. Sometimes you'll have a child who kicks the whole time, another one who's just calm, and sometimes when they come out, you actually see the same thing. And I think I had my daughter who would cry for a straight hour, or sometimes I would go, when she sees strangers, and she would just scream. And then I had my son who was the opposite, and I expected the boy to be more what's the word, but I expected the reverse in terms of boy girl. So I think the thing to underscore is try and understand what the personality of the child is. And then for a 2-year-old, signs are very, very important and very clear. I mean, if you have to put tape around something and say don't cross here. And I have a good example of a child I won't mention. It's one of our 4 children who, when they were young, they were not allowed to go to the kitchen. So as they got older, they would just walk to the kitchen and they would just stand there, like they would freeze at the door of the kitchen, because for so long they had been told, if they go to the kitchen, they'll get burnt or whatever. But it was interesting how the boundary was so clear, and they literally had to be told, it's okay, now you can enter the kitchen. And so for the younger ones, like a 2-year-old, physical boundaries are very important. So try as much as possible for the 2-year-old. If you have to write it down, say no this, no that, and keep reinforcing. So don't get tired of letting them know what the boundary looks like. And so it's just the child's personality. As they're growing, you're understanding them better. Some children are like us parents, so you might find a calm child who's like their mother or like their father. So work with the child's personality, even as opposed to the sex of the child. Thank you for that. I'm just gonna check the chat and see. Moses, you have something to say? Please go ahead. We're gonna wrap up in about 2 minutes. Moses, your hand is up. Maybe it's an old hand. Just check the chat for me. Okay. All right. So Juliet, I hope that those answers were helpful. And I want to really thank each and every one of you for coming. We are working on an Empower With session soon for the kids. And we are thinking around just CSR, maybe something around giving back to the community and teaching kids that through practical ways. So please follow us on our socials. We would love to have all your children for our Empower With sessions. Because of my full-time job, I'm not able to do as many sessions as I would want to. But I do try as best as I can to do at least 2 to 4 sessions every holiday. I know this is a long holiday. Please take time to set these boundaries for your children. Screen time, there is all kinds of IT gurus out here who can help you set limits on screen time. This can be physical or automated, like on their tablets. You can put a timer. You can set time for watching TV. Like for my granddaughter here, we only watch TV in the evening, and when she wants to watch in the morning, I keep reminding her that TV is for the evening. So I think it's just each of us is really going to be challenged for almost 3 months in terms of how we manage our children. So this topic of boundaries we thought is really important in terms of how then we manage the kids during the holiday. So this webinar will be posted online. For those of you who have missed it, it'll be on our YouTube channel. And we're looking forward to your contributions on topics that you would want discussed. You can reach out to me directly or through our socials for Empower With. We are happy to take feedback and for each of us to continue growing together in these conversations. So we are on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and TikTok, I think. Yes, and TikTok. So looking forward to your engagement, and I really just want to say a big thank you. It's 41. We've run over a bit because we joined a bit late, but I really want to thank you for sacrificing the time. Most of you have had a long work day, so we don't take it for granted that you're able to join us. And I want to say I'm very proud of my 5-year-old granddaughter who has been silent the whole time. She's taken a nap, woken up, and now I get to give her something to eat. So thank you all for coming. If you have any questions, please post in the chat. But for now, I'd like to wish you all a good night. And as you get ready for the weekend, have a great one. Thank you so much.